I just came back from dinner with my mom, and we talked about something that happened literally 20 years ago. And while we did, I thought it'd be a good story to share here. Now, before I jump in, I need to sketch the surroundings a bit. At that time, my mom was 43 and I was 18. Also, our relationship wasn't very good. Admittedly, that was pretty much my fault. I was a rebellious teenager then, and important for the story, I was caught up in the metal scene, among other things being a vocalist of a black metal band. Those inhuman screeches. It's actually a trick. Next to that, I had picked up a liking for weed. My mom stood out less, in attire and manners. Although, and yes, this is important too, she likes the color blue and had long blonde hair. Behind our house stood a house owned by social services. I'm Belgian, my terms might be a bit off on this. An organization that provided sheltered living. So there lived 3 men, Abe, Bart, and Carl. Abe and Bart are obviously in need of help, but completely harmless. Carl was, even in that company, special. Not on first sight, he was a rather diminutive guy who dressed well. But, well, if people are really detached from reality, you just have to look in their eyes to know. Now, Carl might have been heavily medicated. He was still batshit crazy. I don't know what really was the problem. I'm not a psychiatrist, but in a nutshell, he suffered religious delusions and was convinced that people were angels, demons, or characters from the Bible. I didn't know that, but in hindsight. Let me give you a rundown of how I looked when I returned home from a show. Long hair, a beard, rather muscular build, a black frock like monks wear, studded leather belt and arm bracelets, a big pentagram around my neck, and I went full-out corpse paint. So in short, after seeing me walk around like that a few times and hearing the frequent arguments my mom and I had, Carl was convinced that I was a literal demon. And here comes the catch. My mom was the Virgin Mary. Blue clothes, long blonde hair, whom I wanted to abduct into hell. But he had his medication and he wasn't a danger to anybody. Until on a hot summer day I got a visit from the police because I had gotten in a fight. So what does my mom do? She invited the cops to sit in the yard while they talked to me. To Carl, that was somehow the straw that broke the camel's back. The cops leave. I succeeded in convincing them I just happened to be near the fight, and my mom and I started arguing. At the same time, Carl starts skipping his medication. A week later, I have a show in a neighboring city, so around 3 a.m. I return. Because I wasn't that stupid, I didn't drink or smoke before getting in my car, but I was planning on doing that afterwards. In the car, there were 2 bandmates, Andreas and Quentin. I go inside. My mom is fast asleep, and I get a few beers while we sit in the garden. Smoking had to happen outside, and it was pretty hot anyway. We sit, chat, smoke, drink. All is great. Until Carl decides to act. "What the fuck?" says Andreas. He pointed to the hedge at the top of our garden. All 3 of us, intoxicated by then, watch Carl dressed in a white gown with an aluminum circle on his head wrestle himself through the hedge. "What do you think he's doing?" I said. "Begone, forces of evil!" he shouted, waving at us with a rather large cross, like as long as my arm. At that moment, I admit, we didn't know what to do. If you think about it, he probably took that as a sign that his cross worked. So he runs to my open back door. My cue to run behind him, screaming at him to stop. He enters my house shrieking that he's come to save the Virgin Mary. Now it gets weird. My mom wakes up from all the shouting. She wore white PJs and had her hair loose. Carl must have thought she descended from heaven, so he bolts up the stairs, falls to his knees and starts praying. The 3 demons behind him are, strangely enough, not repelled. I grab him by his scrawny neck, totally ready to go medieval on him. I mean, we had our problems for sure, but this is my mom we're talking about. He jumps up, wrestles himself free, and manages to hit Quentin in the head with his cross. Andreas and I back up, look at each other and nod. Carl is going down. "Stop!" says my mom as loud as she can. She walks up to Carl, takes his hand and says, "I think you're seeing this wrong." He looks up at her and starts crying. I mean ugly bawling. He tells her he wants to protect her from, points at us. Mom goes, I know, but that really isn't necessary." I whisper to Andreas to call the cops downstairs and stay there. "Look, he's just a kid who likes to dress himself up. I don't really like it either, but it's a game." She motions to me and I lose the frock, the belt, and stuff. Underneath, that stuff was heavy and it got hot. I'm only wearing my boxers. I wish I had a picture. Carl is still on his knees crying. My mom is standing before him smiling. Quentin, in full garb, is sitting against the wall holding his head, and I'm standing in my boxers. I mean, you don't have to be crazy to get confused by that. Carl takes a deep breath. "But you're the Virgin Mary." "I'm just a nice lady," she says. "And they're my son and his friends. And you're Carl. It's all okay." He looks at me, then at my mom, stands up and grabs his cross. He looks at it and then says, in an almost childish voice, "Didn't I tell you?" After which he makes his way downstairs, through the garden, through the hedge and back to his own place. Somewhat later, the cops show up. We explain everything, and the next day Carl moved out. That was the story about the one man I didn't want to meet again, and how I learned that my mom is, underneath her appearance, brave and smart as fuck. To conclude, 2 days later his social worker paid us a visit, telling us what had happened in Carl's mind leading up to that night, repeating over and over how happy she was that we were unharmed. I, by then my usual bragging teenage self, said, "I would have dealt with him." The social worker shakes her head. Apparently, Carl told him he didn't only have a cross. He also had a large kitchen knife under his gown. When I was around 11 years old, my family was living in a small rural town in Michigan. I remember that the backyard of our house was huge. A clearing extended almost an acre back into the woods, and at the end of that clearing was a huge brush pile from when we cleared the trees to build the house. One night my mother and my younger brother and I got home relatively late at night, as it was already dark, and I remember my mother freaking out as she pulled up the driveway because she saw someone running along the side of the house. It turns out that someone had broken into our garage and attempted to break into our house. The police were called and they didn't find anyone near the property. A couple days after this incident, my brother refused to go to sleep because he kept hearing noises right outside his window where the door was to our crawl space was located. My parents just attributed this to nerves because of what had happened and didn't really investigate further. Lo and behold, about a week after the initial break-in, my dad is working in the backyard and happens to look behind the brush pile and find some camping materials, knives, and an assortment of guns, some of which had been stolen from our garage. The people who had broke in were watching us from our backyard ever since. Police were called again, but ultimately I don't think anything ever came of it. It's been a few months since this happened, but it's on my mind today and I can't believe I haven't shared it sooner. Back in the winter, I had returned home from New York City and was getting used to the usual schlep on the subway to get to and from work and around the city in general. I hate the subway, as an overreaching sentiment towards the MTA. I had always called it the bane of my existence, because it challenged me in all the areas I am sensitive about. Close proximity to strangers, claustrophobic spaces, temperature extremes, mysterious foul smells, pests and vermin. Overall, it's convenient and tolerable on a good day. But I still had my fair share of unfortunate encounters over the years that led me to regard the subway as a less than ideal mode of transportation around the city. This one early evening on a Sunday solidified my thinking. I had just left a breast cancer fundraiser event at around 7 p.m. and was only going a few stops over to where my house was on the N train. My sister and I sat chatting quietly as the train began to move. A medium-built black man with a gray pea coat and a beanie made eye contact with me and hurried over. He bent down to my face, extending out his arm for a handshake and said, "Hello there. You are very beautiful. How you doing? What's your name?" I sort of recoiled back, giving him a confused, "What are you doing in my personal space?" kind of look, shaking my head in a clear disinterest to make his acquaintance. All of a sudden, it was like a flip switched and his previously sweet tone turned to an ugly rage. "Fucking bitch, you think you're better than everybody? You ain't shit, ugly bitch. Clown-ass bitch. Fuck out of here, clown-ass bitch." He screamed at the top of his lungs, and I noticed everyone turning and staring in our direction. "Fuck you anyway." He made a kind of waving off gesture, while I just kinda sat there staring at him wide-eyed, wondering what he was going to do next. His entire stance was very aggressive. He then stopped screaming, and to my surprise made a direct pass to try the same exact thing on my sister who was right next to me. "Wow, you're beautiful too. Can I shake your hand?" And he reached directly next to me to touch her. The fucking nerve. I extended my arm and said firmly, "Hey, leave my sister alone and back up out of our space." This guy smacks my hand out of the way. Now he's fully pushed my buttons. I stand up and realize I'm about eye level with him, so he must have been around 5'9", maybe 5'11" at most. "Don't fucking touch my sister," I said, and I was officially heated. This part is a blur as I don't remember what he said when he pushed me and we began to scuffle, but I landed a very sweet uppercut on his jaw. This enraged him and he had me on my back within seconds, kicking me and screaming, "I will fucking kill you, bitch." After what felt like an eternity, 2 good people of the subway had run up behind him and grabbed him off of me. I heard one guy say, "Leave her alone, dude. What the fuck?" And when I looked up, I saw several horrified passengers staring at us while we engaged in a full-out brawl. Adrenaline was pumping through my veins, so everything was bright and my vision was pinpoint and I felt numb. The conductor said something over the speakers about holding the train at the platform, and I stood there shaking as the guys threw him onto the platform and made a barrier between the platform and the door as he attempted to get back in the car, clawing at the air and sputtering curses at me, staring me dead in the eye. The subway door finally closed, locking him out. He pounded on the doors as though he was possessed by a demon, screaming so loud you could see every sinew in his neck as he pounded on the glass. His eyes were so bloodshot they almost glowed red, and his voice so loud it pierced through the entire car. "I will kill you, bitch!" Then the subway car pulled away from the station. Someone pointed to the ground. He had dropped his cell phone in the altercation. It was unlocked. I found out everything I could about this crazed stranger. His name, his social media handles, saw all his selfies, the fact that he had been trying very hard and was unsuccessful at getting laid. His text messages revealed he was a drug dealer of some sort. I suspected crack because of the prices, increments, and wording of the texts, which would also kind of explain his violent outburst. I'd seen my fair share of crazy in New York City, but it hadn't gotten this up close and personal in years. I was shook and emotional following the attack. I went to the police station with my aunt and uncle soon after, and I was filing a report when one of the cops at the station says, "If it turns out that you stole this phone from this guy, you're gonna be in a lot of trouble." Dead ass straight to my face implies that I stole this phone from a complete stranger on the subway, and now I was spinning some elaborate web that included turning myself into the police station. when I was filing a report of assault. I wasn't wrong in thinking that that guy wasn't going to be much help. I digress. I gave them his full name and they said that they had a lot of people in the system with that same name. I said, "Well, I have all this specific info I got off the phone." They said they couldn't use anything off the phone without a warrant. They ended up taking his cell phone from me and nothing ever came of it, except for the ginormous bruise I had from getting a blunt kick to the thigh. An officer came by my house a few months later with some photos of extremely similar looking black men, none of which I could confidently identify as my assailant. Haven't heard a single thing since, and I can't find the guy on social media again. So this lunatic is out there probably riding the subway somewhere waiting for his next girl to reject a handshake so he can absolutely go batshit crazy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened had it been late at night with nobody around me. That guy was screaming that he was going to kill me, and I'm sure he would have given the chance. I was around 13 through 14 years old at the time, and I was recently granted the privilege of staying home alone. Every now and then when I was home alone, I'd hear sounds coming from upstairs, and so instinctively I called my mom. She then told me the story of how she used to hear things in her old house all the time, and how it's just the house settling in. Fast forward to many instances of sound later. I was going to be completely silent and make as little noise as possible. Within the first half an hour, there was nothing. Not a peep out of the entire house. I eventually got bored and felt safe, so I went to go grab the TV remote and watch some TV. But a few seconds after I grabbed the remote, I heard a huge crash upstairs and running footsteps. I was more sure than ever that someone was in my house. By now, there were plenty of consistent sounds coming from upstairs that it was a fact that someone was upstairs. 14-year-old me decided to hatch a quick plan. Being the skinny, most non-threatening little girl I was, I first grabbed a kitchen knife. Then I grabbed a shoe and propped open the front door. And after a few moments, I hear some deep breaths. I yell out in my deepest voice that I could. "I know you're upstairs. I'm giving you a chance to leave without me calling the police, but I have propped the front door open and I will be in the bathroom. Be aware that I am holding a knife, and if you refuse to leave, I will call the police." Sure enough, I walk into my bathroom with my knife, absolutely scared to death that someone will open the door. I wait and wait, until the one sound that to this day always scares me for some reason. I heard the front door close and the shoe was moved. I quickly locked the door and turned on the alarm system. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, hit the notification button, all that good stuff. And if you would like to help support the channel, I recommend you check out the membership option. There should be a button down by the subscribe that says join now. That'll get you a cool custom badge that you'll see down in the comments, some custom emotes for my live streams, early access to all of my new content, and all that good stuff. And if getting early access to the content is just something you want, or even hearing some of the old stories that I've made unlisted, make sure you check out my Patreon page. Link in the description. I appreciate you listening to this video. And for those of you that did check out the stories that I made up, I really appreciate it. And I'm glad the majority of you liked it. I will catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye. This incident took place on my 21st birthday. My friends and I decided to go to a local tavern to catch a drink on my birthday. I was broke like a bum, but they said they'd cover my drink, so I couldn't turn it down. When we arrived, we sat at a table located in the corner of the tavern. In total, there were 4 of us. My friends Brian, Scott, and Beatrice. Beatrice had a thing for Scott, but Scott had a thing for me. which made things complicated sometimes. Scott offered to go get the drinks. Beatrice quickly decided to go with him. My friend and I are chatting when I notice a group of people walk into the bar. There's a very pale lady in all tight leather, a beefy-looking black man in a long trench coat, and a scrawny white guy also wearing a long trench coat. They catch eyes with me and walk up. They ask my friend to leave and that they need to talk to me in private. My friend looks at me. I look back and let him know that I'll be okay. He's gone and these three people sit down. They introduce themselves. The lady in all leather is Trinity. The scrawny white guy is named Neo. And the person I am speaking to, the black gentleman in the long trench coat, introduces himself as Morpheus. They ask me if I want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. I ask them if a rabbit hole is considered a butthole. They look at each other, and I hear Trinity ask Neo, "Are you sure he's the one?" Neo looks back at her and reassures her, "Oh yes, he is most definitely the one." I ask them the one for what. Morpheus shushes both Neo and Trinity, never breaking eye contact with me. He tells me that he will let me know, but first he needs to know if I'm with them or if I want to continue my meager life. He puts his hands in front of him, palms facing up, with a pill in each hand. One is red and one is yellow. He tells me if I want to learn the secrets of the universe, then to take the red pill. But if I want to continue down my piss-poor existence, take the piss-yellow pill. Obviously, this was a joke, so I decided to take the red pill. As soon as I did, they asked me to accompany them outside. I shouted over to my friends that I would be right back, and I followed Morpheus, Trinity, and Neo out to the parking lot. On my way to the parking lot, I started to get very dizzy. The trio exchanged glances and I see smiles creep across their faces. Morpheus lets them know that it's almost time. They lead me to the back of a white van, open the double back doors and tell me to get inside. I'm very dizzy at this point, but I do still have my common sense and I tell them I am not doing that. They tell me that's fine, to just have a seat on the back. Given the fact that I was already very dizzy, I decided that was probably a good idea. As soon as I sat down, everything went black. The next thing I know, I wake up in a porta potty. I decide to be quiet and listen around to make sure no one's there. After about 45 minutes, I decide the coast is clear. I slowly open the door and look outside. It appears as though I'm in a basement. I see stairs leading up to a door, and a window against the wall that's just smaller than me. I don't know where I am or where the people I was with are, so I decide now is my chance to escape. I climb up the stairs and open the door, and I'm in a kitchen. At this time I realize I'm hungry, so I go to their refrigerator. I open it up and decide to make myself a cheese sandwich. I notice some pickled pig feet in the door, so I decide to cut the knuckles out and put those on as well. I'm about halfway through the sandwich when I hear a door swing open. Trinity and Neo rush into the kitchen. I quickly pick up the pickled pig feet and start throwing them at them, at least trying to get the juices in their eyes so they can't see. They keep screaming that it's not what I think. They just want to learn from me. I ask them what they want to learn. They ask me if I want to learn how deep the rabbit hole goes. I told them it's enough with this rabbit hole shit. I'm getting out of here. I run and dive out the kitchen window, landing softly on the grass in front. I look around and notice that we're in a very nice neighborhood. I immediately start heading towards the fence to jump it and get to the street. When I make it to the street, I see a Toyota Prius cruising down the road, so I jump in front of it, waving frantically. To my horror, it is Morpheus. He doesn't even slow down. He hits me going probably 20 miles per hour. I'm flung over the car and the next thing I know I'm laying on my back on the pavement. Morpheus gets out of his Toyota Prius and makes it up to me just as Trinity and Neo do as well. They once again exchange glances. Then Morpheus says, It's time to find out how deep the rabbit hole goes. Trinity, Neo, pick this guy up and let's go. Trinity and Neo both lean over and pick me up. I start to struggle, but Morpheus reaches over and gives me the biggest purple nurple I've ever had. I instantly stopped squirming. I let them carry me back into the yard and around the house. They brought me into the backyard and threw me on my face. Morpheus throws a shovel next to me, points to the ground in front of me and tells me to start digging. The first thing that pops into my mind is that they're having me dig my own grave. I start begging them not to kill me, that I won't tell a soul and they can let me go. Trinity and Neo pick me to my feet and hand me the shovel. They escort me 2 steps forward and point at the ground. To my utter horror, I see a hole in our beautiful Mother Earth. I feel my eyes start to well with tears. Morpheus breaks the silence. You better start digging. I want to see how deep that rabbit hole goes, boy. Tears streaming down my face, by this point, I start digging. I make it 4 feet down before an animal starts to poke its head out. Morpheus shines a light on it, to reveal that we have uncovered a mole. He looks at Trinity, then quickly at Neo. Well, I guess it wasn't a rabbit hole, it was a mole hole. He walks up to me and grabs me by my shoulders. He tells me that I've done a great job, and then they all walk away, leaving me looking at a mole and holding a shovel. I quickly make my way to the street and flag down the nearest vehicle. I ask them to take me to the police station, which they do. Once there, I file a report and give the address of the place I was taken to. The police said they made contact with the owner and they had no idea who I was talking about. From there, the police said they really couldn't do much. I was taken to the hospital to get a drug screening for the pill I had taken. It was, of course, a date rape drug. It was only then that I realized how lucky I truly was. That was the second to last time I ever took a strange pill from a stranger in a bar.